The Guest List Part 2. Chapter 7, A Strange Proposal. By the time the sun dipped beneath the horizon, the entire villa had been reset. The staff, under Camilla's calm but firm direction, removed every trace of the ceremony that never happened. The floral arch disassembled, the aisle runners rolled up, the his and her seating markers discreetly boxed and hidden from view. There was no announcement, no dramatic declaration. Just the quiet, invisible unraveling of a day that never was. The guests, those dazzling, unruffled socialites in designer linen and inherited diamonds, sipped their Negronis by the pool and said nothing. It was as if Allegra's absence had been scheduled all along. They were far too trained in high society indifference to react to anything less than death or scandal on the front page. But Camilla couldn't stop thinking about it: the empty bridal suite, the untouched dress, the silence in a place meant to overflow with celebration. Most of all, she couldn't stop thinking about Adrian. He had slipped through the day with impossible ease. Graceful. Cool. Cordial. And yet, now and then, Camilla would catch a flicker in his eyes, not sadness, exactly. More like detachment. The gaze of someone watching his own life like it belonged to someone else. That night, after the would-be wedding dinner became a thank you for coming garden party, Camilla stood alone on the lower terrace. The lights were low. A jazz trio played in the corner. And above, the stars rolled silently over the Amalfi sky like scattered diamonds. She was sipping something with lemon and gin, though she'd barely tasted it, when she heard footsteps behind her. Adrian. Of course. He had changed out of his day clothes, now in dark slacks and a crisp, open-collared shirt. No blazer. No shoes. The kind of handsome that didn't try anymore. Escaping, he asked, his voice light. Recharging, Camilla said, still looking at the horizon. He joined her at the balustrade, leaning casually against it. For a moment, neither spoke. Then he said, "You did a beautiful job, you know. Today. The whole week." She turned to look at him. Even though there was no wedding. Especially because of that. She laughed softly, the sound more bitter than amused. "I've planned events for 15 years. I've handled royal tantrums and surprise pregnancies. But this is the first time the bride just didn't show up." Adrian didn't flinch. She was never really here. Not in any way that mattered. Camilla looked at him then, more carefully. "You really mean that, don't you?" He nodded, and for once, the mask slipped. "Just a little. It was always a deal," he said. "Paper and power. My father wanted leverage. Her family wanted optics. Allegra and I were the decor." Camilla frowned. "So you would have married her anyway?" "Yes," he said, and then, "No. I would have stood there. Let it happen. Let the machine run me over." He turned to face her, fully now. "But I'm glad she left. I just wish she hadn't left you to clean up the mess." There was something in his voice, low, sincere. No performative charm, no billionaire swagger. Just a man, strangely free and completely uncertain of what came next. Camilla set her glass down on the railing. "So, what happens now? You fly back to Milan? Tell your board the engagement's over? Start dating some hedge fund princess with nicer parents?" Adrian didn't smile. He stepped closer, not looming, but present, suddenly real in a way she hadn't expected. "I don't want to go back," he said. "Not yet." Camilla blinked. "You mean, stay here?" "I mean," he hesitated. Then he said it quietly, clearly. "Stay here. With me. Just for a few days." She stared at him. "Help me salvage the trip," he added, voice softer. "Let's use what's left. The villa. The food. The time. Call it anything you want: damage control, decompression, a faux honeymoon without the paperwork." Camilla laughed, startled. "That is, probably the strangest proposal I've ever heard." Adrian smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. I'm not asking you to pretend to be the bride. I'm not asking you for anything ridiculous. I just don't want to spend the next few days with polite liars and family retainers. He looked down, then back up at her. Be my friend. Talk to me like I'm a person, not a project. Camilla hesitated. The air around them had thickened, but not with tension, with possibility. Her professional instincts buzzed. This was a terrible idea. Messy. Undefined. Dangerous, in that slow, emotional way that didn't sting until later. But her heart, the part she kept buried under logistics and timelines, leaned in. Just a little. And for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like someone watching someone else's love story unfold. She felt written into it. Camilla smiled. Just a little. All right. I'll stay. Adrian exhaled, and in that moment, the weight of 100 expectations seemed to lift from his shoulders. Then let's start over, he said. As two strangers in a villa on the cliffs of Italy, with nothing left to lose. Chapter 8, Playing the Part. The morning after the non-wedding felt strangely ordinary. There were no sirens, no gossip columns screaming scandal, no paparazzi helicopters hovering over the Amalfi coast. The sun still rose. The sea still shimmered. And the guests, who must have realized by now that there would be no bride, no vows, no sweeping orchestral entrance, were still sipping espresso and nibbling Cantuxi on the mosaic-tiled terrace as if nothing had changed. Camilla walked through it all like a woman caught between two worlds. In one, she was the professional, composed, in control, holding the seams of an unraveling event together with invisible thread. In the other, she was something else now. Not a planner. Not quite a guest. Something in between. Something that had shifted when Adrian asked her to stay. He hadn't meant it romantically. Not exactly. It wasn't about sweeping gestures or impulsive declarations. It was more dangerous than that. It was intimate. The strange arrangement began subtly. That morning, Adrian appeared beside her during breakfast, pouring her coffee before she could reach the pot. Guests expect the hosts to be seen, he said smoothly, like they were already playing their roles. Smile, make small talk. If we disappear, they'll start to whisper louder. Camilla raised an eyebrow. So now I'm your co-host. He glanced sideways. Temporary. Trial run. No pay, but exceptional sea views. She smirked and sipped her coffee. Fine. But don't expect me to wear a name tag. Together, they floated through the day as a matched pair, not quite lovers, not quite strangers. Camilla found herself beside Adrian at the terrace bar, laughing with guests about the mystery of the missing bride as though it were a clever party twist. She walked with him through the lemon groves as they accidentally bumped into family friends. She nodded politely as socialites asked if the ceremony had been postponed and whether there would be a private celebration later in the week. They let them wonder. They let them believe. And as the day passed, the performance blurred into something else, something that felt alarmingly natural. Adrian wasn't just charming. He was relaxed in a way she hadn't seen before, as though, without the weight of Allegra or expectations, he was finally breathing again. And Camilla? She couldn't explain it. Somewhere between curating impromptu dinner seating and joining Adrian on a boat ride he claimed was a rescue mission for a bottle of Lost Rose, she stopped feeling like a guest at someone else's disaster and started feeling like she belonged there beside him, under the Italian sun, with the sea wind threading through her hair. Later that afternoon, as golden hour drenched the cliffs in liquid light, Adrian approached her in the main salon. "Come with me," he said, offering no further explanation. She followed through the villa's winding corridors, past the shuttered bridal suite, down a narrow staircase she hadn't noticed before. They emerged into a private loggia facing the sea. No guests. No staff. Just a small table for two, already set with silver and candlelight, and a bottle of wine resting in a chilled ceramic holder. Camilla blinked. This wasn't on the itinerary. Adrian pulled out her chair. "Call it Improvisation. They ate slowly seared fish, rosemary potatoes, roasted figs with honey and talked about nothing and everything. About childhood memories. The worst weddings they'd ever attended. Books they never finished. The difference between being looked at and being seen. At one point, as she laughed at a story he told about nearly getting expelled from boarding school for rewiring a classmate's electric toothbrush to play Vivaldi, Adrian looked at her for just a moment too long. Camilla felt it. The shift. The slow, unmistakable gravity of something unspoken pulling them toward a center neither of them had named yet. She looked away first. By the time the stars appeared, the villa above had gone quiet. The party was over. The staff had retreated. Only the sea and the soft clink of glasses remained. "You're very good at this," Adrian said, voice low. "Pretending." Camilla smiled faintly. "It's what I do. Keep things pretty. Keep things polite. Even when the ceiling is collapsing." He studied her. "Are you pretending now?" She hesitated. Then, deliberately, a little. "But less than I was yesterday." Adrian leaned in slightly. Not close enough to cross a line. Just enough for her to feel the warmth of him. "Me too." They didn't kiss and not yet. But the space between them had changed and they both knew it. Back in her suite that night, Camilla stood on her balcony, arms crossed over her chest, wind tugging gently at her robe. She could still feel the day on her skin. The sun. The laughter. Him. This was dangerous. This was not what she came for. But for the first time in a long, long while, she didn't feel like someone watching love from the sidelines. She felt like she'd stepped into the story. And it was only just beginning. Chapter 9, A Sunset Moment. The fourth evening came like a sigh. The sun began its slow descent behind the cliffs, and Villa Rosalia turned golden. Every window pane, every marble tile, every polished stairway caught in a warm, liquid light that seemed to soften the edges of everything. Even Camilla. She had spent the morning answering passive-aggressive messages from Francesca, who had temporarily returned to Milan to handle optics, and the afternoon reassuring guests that the week of celebration was still unfolding beautifully. But as the sky turned from rose to amber, she let herself stop pretending. Just for a little while. She slipped away to the western terrace, the hidden one, framed by climbing ivy and flanked by tall pines that swayed lazily in the sea breeze. It had become her secret refuge. A place where the hum of champagne conversations couldn't reach, where the only soundtrack was the soft crash of waves against the rocks far below. She wasn't alone. Adrian was already there. He stood at the edge, hands resting on the stone balustrade, staring out over the water as though it were speaking to him. The sky behind him was painted in streaks of orange and violet, and the outline of his profile sharp, thoughtful, somehow both elegant and tired, looked almost like it belonged to a statue from another time. Camilla hesitated in the doorway, but he didn't turn. "Come watch it with me," he said quietly. She stepped forward without a word. They stood side by side, their shoulders almost touching, the horizon unspooling endlessly before them. "It's the best part of the day," he murmured, eyes still on the sun. "That last 10 minutes. When everything turns to gold. When you believe just for a second that maybe time might stop." Camilla glanced at him. "And what would you do if it did?" He finally turned, and for the first time that day, looked at her fully. "I'd stay right here," he said. "With you." She felt the breath catch in her throat, not because it was bold, but because it wasn't. It was quiet. Simple. Undeniable. He meant it. And it wasn't flirtation anymore. It was something deeper. Something dangerously close to real. They sat on the low bench that curved along the terrace wall, wine glasses resting on the table between them, the shadows of dusk growing long. "I used to think I wanted a life full of ambition," Adrian said, swirling his glass slowly. "Power. Money. Influence. All the things my father parades around like trophies." Camilla tilted her head. You don't want that anymore. I'm not sure I ever did. He glanced at her. But you've met him. You can imagine how difficult it is to know where your choices end and his begin. Camilla nodded. It's hard to want something when you've been told what to want since you were a child. They sat in silence for a long moment, the kind that doesn't demand to be filled. Then he said, almost without thinking, do you want to know the first moment I noticed you? Camilla blinked, surprised. I thought I was invisible. He smiled. Hardly. It was the first night at the welcome dinner. You were standing near the fire pit, talking to the caterer about table arrangements. And you were frowning. Charming. It was the kind of frown that wasn't about ego or show. It was a this matters and I won't pretend it doesn't kind of frown. You cared. And no one else in that entire villa seemed to care about anything that wasn't surface level. She looked down, suddenly self-conscious. You don't have to say things like that, she said quietly. I'm not saying it to charm you. Then why? Because it's true. The sun dipped lower, kissing the sea. Camilla's voice was barely audible. You know this can't be anything. Adrian looked at her. I know. She turned to him. This isn't my world. I'm not one of your father's perfect matches. I didn't come here for this. I know, he said again. But he didn't move away. He didn't touch her. He just stayed there breathing beside her, and in the space between their silence, something softened. There was no kiss. No confession. Just the quiet knowing that something had started, something slow, inconvenient, and unstoppable. And as the last sliver of sun disappeared behind the horizon, casting everything in shadow and gold, Camilla closed her eyes for a moment. Because she knew. This wasn't just a week at a villa. This was the start of something she hadn't planned for. Something no clipboard could contain. Chapter 10, Whispers in the Hall. By the fifth day, the villa had transformed from a place of glamour into something else entirely, a stage, perhaps, where the performers were still smiling, still toasting, but the script had long since unraveled. Camilla felt it first in the hallways. Not in the sunlight-drenched salons or during the charmed afternoon aperitivos, where conversations stayed sweet and unbothered, but in the quiet corridors between guest rooms where voices dropped, glances darted, and whispers carried like wind through stone. The guests had begun to ask questions. Not directly, of course, that would have been gauche. But in the subtle way the rich and bored have always done, through tone, through suggestion, through secrets traded like jewelry. She overheard the first whisper late one morning, while walking past the second-floor landing. Two women dressed in silk caftans and diamonds the size of olives stood near the window alcove, speaking in low, rapid French. She vanished without a word, one said. No note, no farewell. What kind of girl does that? A girl who doesn't want to marry, clearly. Or a girl who was told not to. The second woman looked around before adding, I heard Allegra's father pulled her out. Something about revised terms. The Morettis weren't offering enough. A financial renegotiation? On the morning of the wedding. A business deal. That's what this always was. Later that day, during a slow lunch on the East Terrace, Camilla caught another thread, this time from a pair of men sipping limoncello beside the fountain. She left with the tennis coach, I heard, one murmured behind his sunglasses. Not the one from Monaco. Apparently they were close. Very close. Well, I suppose someone was in love. The words struck Camilla like a cold draft. Everyone had a version. Everyone had a theory. And not a single person was brave enough to ask Adrian directly. Instead, they turned their attention elsewhere, and lately, that attention had begun to drift toward her. It started with small glances. Then questions masked as compliments. You've been so gracious, dear. So involved. Are you family or? Not the planner anymore, surely not with the bride gone. Oh, you're at Adrian's side quite a bit. Such chemistry. Camilla handled it all with practiced neutrality, polite smiles, vague replies, the occasional strategic disappearance. But it was getting harder to ignore. The villa had become a pressure cooker of speculation, and she and Adrian were now its most watched storyline. That night, she found herself restless. Unable to sleep, she left her suite and wandered the villa's hallways in bare feet and a soft wrap, the marble floors cool beneath her solace. The lights had been dimmed for the evening, and the only sound was the quiet shuffle of waves far below. Then from just around the corner she heard it again. Voices. Low. Insistent. A man and a woman. She froze. I don't trust her, the woman hissed. She showed up, and now the bride's gone. Don't be dramatic, the man replied. She's just the planner. Is she? She doesn't seem like Adrian's type. That's the point. She seems real. Which makes her dangerous. Camilla stepped back quickly, her heart pounding. She didn't recognize the voices, maybe distant cousins, or friends of the groom's family. But it didn't matter. The seed had been planted. She was now part of the story. Not just as the one fixing it, but as the one possibly rewriting it. The next morning, the whispers reached Adrian. They were seated in the breakfast courtyard, Camilla sipping espresso, Adrian lazily flipping through the villa's guest book, which had somehow become more entertaining than any newspaper. He set the book down. Did you know you're having an affair with me? Camilla nearly choked on her coffee. What? Adrian smirked. According to room 204, we're involved. Madly. Secretly. Possibly since the day you arrived. She rolled her eyes. That's absurd. Of course it is. A pause. Then he added, but I'm not going to deny it. Camilla gave him a pointed look. You should. It'll make things easier. Adrian leaned in slightly, voice quieter. Easier for who? She didn't answer. She couldn't. Because he wasn't wrong, the whispers were absurd. But what had started as proximity was quickly becoming something else. And while nothing had happened, no touch, no kiss, no confession, there was a current between them now. Constant. Unspoken. Electric. And everyone had noticed. Even them. That afternoon, the staff moved about with forced cheer. Florists replaced the dying roses. A jazz trio rehearsed in the garden. The chef tested a new tiramisu recipe for the Friday farewell brunch. But beneath the busy hands and clinking glassware, Camilla felt it again, that sense that the air had changed. That the story everyone came for had ended. And a new one had quietly begun. Chapter 11, Shared Secrets. The villa had shifted again. The week had begun with glittering performances and whispered expectations, but now, as the days unspooled like ribbon, everything softened. The guests were quieter. The gossip, while still alive, had lost its venom. People had begun to accept that the wedding, whatever it had been meant to be, was not going to happen. And surprisingly, no one had left. It was as if Villa Rosalia had lulled them into surrender. Why abandon the beauty, the food, the sun, when one could simply pretend the drama belonged to someone else? Camilla found herself adapting, too. She had stopped checking her email. Her phone, normally attached to her palm like a lifeline, lay untouched on the nightstand most of the day. And when Adrian came to find her, which he did, more and more frequently now, she no longer asked why. She simply went with him. They were on the rooftop terrace that evening, just after twilight. Adrian had insisted they climb the winding staircase up to the villa's highest point, a narrow stone platform surrounded by vines and open air. The stairs were ancient and uneven, the kind that demanded a hand on the railing and just enough trust in your footing to feel reckless. At the top, the view stole her breath. Below them, the coastline curled like a sleeping animal, dotted with flickering lights from distant boats and the occasional passing Vespa on the road below. Above them, stars bled through the darkening sky in layers, first faint, then brighter, until the night felt crowded with constellations. They sat on the ledge, backs against the wall, legs stretched out. Adrian passed her a small bottle of limoncello he'd smuggled up in his jacket pocket, and they sipped from it like two teenagers hiding on a rooftop from the world. "So," he said after a long silence, "what did you run from?" Camilla blinked. "What makes you think I ran from anything?" He turned his head toward her, the corner of his mouth lifting. "You have the look. That quiet I built my life from scratch fire." She stared at him, caught off guard. Then, after a beat, she said, "I didn't run. I escaped." "There's a difference. Tell me." She paused, then exhaled slowly. "My mother was a wedding planner too," she began. "Only she did it in a tiny town in Yorkshire. Back gardens. Church halls. No budgets. Lots of opinions. Everyone knew everyone. And when you live in a place like that, they decide what your life should look like before you do." Adrian didn't interrupt. Just listened. "I was supposed to marry a boy from down the road. Be his wife. Take over the business. Smile. Say yes, thank you. Bake things." She took another sip. "But that wasn't me. So, I left. London first. Then Milan. Then anywhere someone needed a girl who could make chaos look beautiful." Adrian's voice was soft. "Do they still talk about you back there?" "Oh, probably. But I don't care. At least I stopped apologizing for being someone else's disappointment." She looked at him. "Your turn." He leaned his head back against the stone. "I didn't run either," he said. "I surrendered." Camilla frowned. "That sounds worse." It was. "But efficient." He glanced sideways. "My father always knew exactly who I should be. Every school, every suit, every dinner guest, every girlfriend. All lined up like a spreadsheet. And for a while, I let him. It was easier than the war." "But Allegra," Camilla began. He gave a dry laugh. "Allegra was never the plan. She was the negotiation. Her family wanted access. Mine needed liquidity. She agreed, I agreed. And we played our parts." Camilla turned to face him more fully. "But you didn't love her." "I never even tried," he said. "Not because I couldn't. But because I knew she'd never let me. She didn't want love. She wanted escape, too. Just, dressed better." Camilla went quiet. And then he added, quietly, "You're the first person I've told that." She felt the words settle in her chest like heat. Not because they were romantic but because they were true. The air was cooler now. The night deeper. Camilla drew her knees up and rested her chin on them. Adrian stretched his arm out along the wall behind her. It wasn't quite around her shoulders, but it was close. She could feel the warmth of him. The nearness. The restraint. "I don't know what this is," she said suddenly. "Us. Here. Now." Adrian didn't move. "Neither do I," he said. "And maybe that's what makes it real." They sat like that for a long while, not touching, not naming it. Just sharing the same air, the same stars, the same weightlessness of people who had finally dropped their roles and started to feel human again. It wasn't passion, not yet. It was trust. And somehow, that felt like more. Chapter 12, Old Flames Return. The next morning dawned too perfect. A soft wind lifted the curtains in Camilla's suite. Church bells echoed faintly from the village below. The scent of lemon trees drifted in on the breeze, mingling with warm pastries and espresso from the kitchen downstairs. It was the kind of morning that lulled you into forgetting. Forgetting that a bride had vanished. Forgetting that nothing in this villa was what it seemed. Forgetting that falling slowly, irrationally, undeniably for a man like Adrian Moretti was a terrible idea. Camilla lingered in her room longer than usual, still in her robe, tea cooling beside her untouched as she stared out toward the sea. She hadn't seen Adrian since their rooftop conversation the night before, the one where they peeled each other open, not with confessions of love, but with truths. Honest, quiet, shared things. And somehow, that had been more intimate than any kiss. She felt different now. Changed. Seen. But then, just after noon, the mood shifted. It began with a knock at the front gates. Not unusual deliveries still arrived daily. But this time, there was a pause. A flutter of silence among the staff. Then a voice familiar, sharp, and unmistakably amused rang through the entrance hall. "Ciao, Tutti. I'm not too late for the wedding, am I?" Camilla was halfway down the staircase when she saw her. Chiara Moretti. Tall. Immaculate. Lethal. She wore cream-colored silk trousers and a matching corset-style top, her jet black hair pinned in a low chignon that probably cost more than a month of Camilla's rent. Her heels clicked elegantly on the marble floor, and she carried no luggage, just a quilted purse, oversized sunglasses, and the scent of rose and something sharper underneath. Her arrival was not accidental. Camilla stopped, one hand resting on the banister. Francesca, recently returned from Milan, greeted Chiara with the kind of strained civility reserved for diplomats and ex-girlfriends. A staff member rushed to take her non-existent bags. Someone else offered her prosecco, which she declined with a smile that managed to insult the glass. And then Adrian appeared. Camilla held her breath. He descended the opposite staircase in a pale blue shirt, sleeves rolled, casual as ever until his eyes landed on Chiara. "Chiara," he said. "Adrian," she replied, and kissed both his cheeks, lingering just a second too long on the second. It was at lunch that Camilla felt it most the disruption. They sat at the long garden table, a dozen guests basking in sunlight and truffle-scented air, while Chiara slinked into the empty seat beside Adrian with the easy confidence of someone who had once known every part of him. And maybe still did. She laughed at all the right moments. Spoke fluent French to the couple across the table. Quoted Nietzsche without sounding pretentious. Complimented the chef in perfect Neapolitan dialect. And the worst part? She wasn't awful. She was likable. Just enough. Which made her far more dangerous. Camilla tried not to watch, but her eyes kept drifting to the way Chiara touched Adrian's arm as she whispered something close, to the way Adrian's body didn't stiffen the way it did around most people. There was history between them. Real and lingering. And Camilla, the girl who was supposed to be the planner, the outsider, the afterthought, suddenly felt small. Ridiculous. Vulnerable. Later that evening, just before dinner, Camilla was on her way to the upper garden when she heard footsteps behind her. "Chiara." "Of course." "Camilla, right," she said sweetly, stepping beside her. "We haven't properly met." Camilla nodded politely. "Welcome to Villa Rosalia." "Thank you," Chiara said, eyes gleaming. "Though I must say, it's been surprising. I expected to see Allegra in a veil, not you holding court by Adrian's side." Camilla kept her tone even. "There's been a change of plans." Chiara tilted her head. "So I've gathered." There was a beat of silence before she continued. "You know," she said lightly, "Adrian and I were together for 3 years. We used to spend weekends in this villa. Same terrace, same wine, same view. A lot of memories. Very passionate ones." Camilla didn't flinch. "I'm sure." Chiara leaned closer. "Just be careful. He has a way of pulling people in. Making them feel like they're the only one. Until they're not." Camilla met her gaze. "Thanks for the advice." Chiara smiled, too wide, too perfect. "Of course," she said. "I just thought you should know what kind of game you're playing." Then she walked away, heels clicking, hips swaying like punctuation marks. That night, Camilla didn't find Adrian. He wasn't in the drawing room. Or the wine cellar. Or the loggia where they sometimes shared late-night drinks. She told herself it didn't matter. She told herself she didn't care. But as she sat alone on the west balcony, watching shadows crawl across the sea, she realized something unsettling. This wasn't just a job anymore. And jealousy cold, unwanted, unfamiliar had just pulled up a chair beside her. That's the end of this part, but trust me, the next one is even more thrilling. We drop fresh episodes every day, so don't miss out. Like, subscribe, and stay tuned, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Thanks for listening to Billionaire Romance Stories, where love meets luxury in the most unexpected places. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and drop a comment. We love hearing your favorite twists and favorite theories. And don't forget to ring that bell, because in this world of yachts, secrets, and luxurious romance, the next story is always one click away.